Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel, and I'm with Astoria Mutual Aid. And as we always do, we have a community spotlight where we like to feature people in our community that are doing good and highlight them, talk with them, and see if maybe they can inspire you to also join in their cause. So tonight, I'm so excited because I'm with the community fridges, and specifically, I guess, the Astoria Community Fridges. And this is something that I've been desperately wanting to do for a long time. So I'm so excited to have with me Amber, Renee, Rena, and Allie. So I'm just going to ask this one question to each of you, and feel free to jump right in. Um, what led you, first of all, what led you to Astoria, and what does it mean to be a part of the Astoria community? And feel free to jump right in.
I guess I'll start. I had lived in Astoria for 6 or 7 years, maybe 8. I honestly can't remember. It's been a long time. But Astoria just feels like home. It just feels like a neighborhood where, I was working in Manhattan before COVID, and I really felt like I was coming home to the community. And so many little restaurants and like mom and pop shops. And it really just felt like, I grew up in a small town, and it really felt like that, even though I was still part of a big city. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm originally from the Lower East Side. And, as with many Native New Yorkers can relate to, have experienced a lot of displacement in my families. So with that, I was raised, although from the Lower East Side, in my teens, I was raised in the South Ozone Park area of Queens. And then as an adult, have sort of just like jumped around from, apartment to apartment as rent increased at the end of the month. And was able to find home in Astoria, where I found a rent stabilized apartment. So I was really grateful for that, but also grateful for the community. In the Lower East Side, like it used to be a really heavy Puerto Rican community, and like your neighbors were your cousins, and you kind of get that sort of like shared sense within Astoria as well. So I thought that was really beautiful to come to.
I'm from Queens originally, and not Astoria, but I've lived in Astoria for the better part of the last 13 years. And I love the trees-lined streets. When I was looking for apartments in Astoria, this is the one that I wanted to live on. And it turns out that my partner, when I met him, lived on this street. But I didn't have a community in Astoria. For the entire time that I've been here, I commuted to Manhattan, I commuted to New Jersey, my friends were in Brooklyn, my parents and my brother and his family were in Queens, but Astoria was where I lived. It wasn't until COVID that Astoria became my community and became my family. And didn't know anybody in this group prior to last year. Mm-hmm. Amber and I started organizing together and didn't meet for a couple of months.
And Renee?
Hi. I think ditto to what everyone said. Like Allie, I think Allie beats me by like a year or so, but I've been here about 6 or 7 years. And like Rena, I didn't have much of a community in Astoria before COVID. I can't give you a good explanation as to why I was drawn here, aside from just a gut feeling that this was a great part of the city. But other than that, just big personal connections with my roommates and my immediate neighbors are what kept me here.
It's interesting. I've lived in Astoria for off and on for about 15, 16 years. And when you talk about it feeling like a small town, Allie, and like the small shops and whatnot. But one of the things that before COVID, I felt a little disillusioned with was that it was starting to lose that feel. And that during the last year, it felt like a small town again. It felt like a community. And, Rena and Renee, you talked a little bit about that. did COVID was that like a silver lining, one of the silver linings of this past year? Can you talk a little bit about that, about how did COVID change the way we view our community?
Well, for me, I actually have a lot of friends that live in Astoria, so like very fortunately, we're all walking distance from each other, so I did get to see them. But as a result of that, we were all looking for things to do when COVID hit. We're like, we can't. A lot of us work in the restaurant industry, so a lot of us were like, what are we going to do? And so it kind of became like, oh, let's start looking into mutual aid work. And kind of like some people fell off because they started getting more work, and I was very fortunate that I worked remotely for the duration of COVID. So I was like, well, I'm at home right now and I don't know what else I can do, but I have sort of a community here already through my friends, but also I don't really know the extended kind of community. So I think doing mutual aid work kind of expanded that for me.
Rena, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. So I always had a fantasy of living in a place where we took care of each other, right? That care was central to our community, that there was collective care, that we practiced alternative types of economy, gift economy, living cooperatively. And I had decided a while ago that that was not going to happen in New York City, that I would have to find it elsewhere and that I was going to have to leave. And this year was the first year that I didn't want to leave, because it feels like we took all of the crisis of the last year and all the pain and suffering and like alchemized it into care. And I didn't know the language of mutual aid. And it was really getting involved with mutual aid that I understood that that was kind of a frame for what it was that I really wanted in the community I lived in and the way that I wanted to contribute to the community. So yeah, absolutely a silver lining.
I'll say that I think that a lot of people have developed like online communities with people that are sort of like strangers. I think we see that a lot on like Twitter. And so when the pandemic hit, as a restaurant worker, a lot of the response to me was like the sense of urgency of like, where are the resources that we can find immediately as restaurant workers to survive, not knowing at the time that, you know, we could have pandemic and unemployment, and standing or waiting on the phone for such long hours to be able to apply for unemployment, not knowing where like your next rent check was. I had actually like a few friends that had to like desperately move out of New York City as fast as possible as a result of the pandemic, because they just didn't, know where their next check was coming in to pay for their rent. And so dealing with that sort of like crisis as a restaurant worker made me focus also on like the other precarities that are involved with that, right? So if you can't pay for rent, then how can you pay for food? And why should you have to pay for food right now or ever at these points? So thinking about like all of those aspects made me want to move into like food work. And originally it started like organizing as with like some students in my school. And then that led to like me learning about like the fridges and wanting to like get involved and start that and build community that way. And since then it's been just like such a beautiful experience working together, and like we're responding to crisis while still living in crisis, but we're able to have like this like moment of like closure and connection with each other to rescue ourselves out of it.
I'm glad that you talked about the your background in food, and which leads us into the community fridges. So I'll admit, for a long time, I didn't really get the community fridges. I just thought people were randomly putting fridges around, like, and I almost thought like, is it part of a food pantry? What exactly is it? And it was only when during the AMAN fall picnic that Evie and Miriam said, Daniel, can you take the leftovers to one of the community fridges? And I was like, okay, and so I went and I put it in and I was like, oh, I get it. Wait, I think I get it. And so the community fridges, for a lot of people, we've seen them around, but I don't think anyone's ever really explained it to me, right? Like what exactly they are. So what are the community fridges and how did they come about? Like what was the impetus for these fridges?
I'll speak on behalf or part of like the 8th Street conversation with that. But for the community fridges, for me, I saw an Instagram post and I was like, oh, there's like this fridge and people can access food there 24/7. And in your head, you're like, oh, an fridge outdoors? What? So then you look at a picture and you're like, oh yeah, that's a fridge outdoors. Like, and you can just open it like your own fridge. So like the immediate concept seemed like super comfortable and fun. I think is what sort of like initially draws people, like sort of the easiness of it, because it's just so relatable, right? Like it's literally like a fridge that you see in your own home, just plugged in outside and you can access it. So I think like that's cool. I think the fridges, they didn't start in New York City. There's an organization called Fridge, which is like a mush of words called Free Fridge. And they have been doing different types of like free food fridges for a while now. So they've been around. I think they've been a little bit more undercover, whereas like through COVID, we saw just like this explosion of people taking on this idea of like, oh, we can have free food and we can just plug in the fridge to do it. But I think like at the heart, that's essentially what it is. It's a fridge that has free food. It's accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most fridges, the one on 8th Street and Astoria Boulevard is that one. And it's for anyone that wants food, right? Like it's removed of necessity. Because the idea is that we all need food, right? Like I always need to eat. Everyone here needs to eat. So there's no ideas like surrounding income around it. And it's just, if you want food, help yourself to it,
And Daniel, you asked about pantries. So Astoria Pantry is a little bit different, but a lot of pantries have barriers of entry, right? So, and they collect data. We intentionally do not collect anything. It is not our job to judge what people need. These are our community members. We need to eat. We're only as healthy as the people in our community. And food is what has always connected people, right? And it's a basic necessity. It's a human right. It's not something that we should be restricted by in movement in our lives because we don't have the money for it.
I love what you just said, Rena. I've always believed that the greatest bridge is the breaking of bread. Of any cultural divide or political divide or religious divide or whatever divide, there's just something about breaking bread. And so I love that you said that. I guess my question is, I mean, I know I put food in the fridges, but how do they operate? Like, how do you know that a fridge is being stocked, or how do you know that, like, what is the mechanism behind that?
It's funny because Amber had mentioned about seeing the fridges on Instagram, which is how I also saw them, just to backtrack a little bit. And I talked to a friend and I was like, we should start a fridge. And through some email chains, someone with AMAN that knew the fridges were happening, I actually got put on a Signal channel with Rena and Amber. And that's kind of where it all started. And I didn't know how like organized it was going to be, because it seemed like a lot of the other fridges were just like, just throw food in. But it's both organized and organic at the same time, if that makes sense. I think it's organized in that we're constantly reaching out to restaurants and businesses and also folks via Instagram on like, hey, do you have food? Do you want to partner with us? Do you have an issue with waste? Do you want to be a bigger part of your community? So in many ways, like, it is organized in that we're constantly doing outreach. We're also organizing drivers to pick up food. Sometimes the food that we receive is like in bulk, and it's going to not just one fridge, but like 5 or 7 fridges. So there is some organization that needs to go into it. And I know I'm speaking on their behalf, but like Rena and Amber and Renee, a ton of distribution organization. I'm like very much behind the scenes and just doing graphics and stuff, but they have done miracles, like organizing everything.
And I want to say that it's not just us. So there are organizers at the other fridges in Astoria and Queens. So there's the Nexus fridge that opened in LIC. There's the Ravenswood fridge, the Queensbridge fridge, the Halal fridge. And right after we started, Jackson Heights opened, Elmhurst, Woodside, and we were just collaborating with everybody. We had all different communication channels on Signal and WhatsApp and Slack and chat. It was just, we were constantly pinging back and forth, sending drivers routes. Amber was putting routes together of like which fridges to hit and how much to drop off at each place. And we were doing distribution across boroughs because we were initially getting food from Brooklyn and the Bronx and Queens, and we're still doing that.
And so when you talk about like working with other like organizations and whatnot, and you mentioned AMAN earlier, can you talk a little bit about the relationship with AMAN and the community fridges, how that relationship works?
Earlier, I think it was Allie that used the word organic. I would say like the nature of mutual aid is you give what you can and you take what you need. And it's the same with us and AMAN. So I know on my side, when I'm trying to organize distributions, I might call out to the AMAN community for assistance with picking up bread or taking some sort of step in the workflow.
And so you talked about like how you've had a number of new fridges open up. Can you talk about a little bit about some of the things that have happened recently that have really excited you in the world of the Astoria fridges? Some recent successes, or maybe just some things that just you know, put a smile on your face with yeah.
I wouldn't say that we've opened them. I just like, sorry, just to always push for clarity, because all the fridges are autonomous. And although we collaborate, like I only, like my main focus is around the 8th Street fridge. But with that, like the collectivity is incredible. You know, we've had folks that like started organizing when in Astoria fridge that went on to like start organizing their own fridges. And through there, we were able to like do cross work collaboration and stock more fridges. So I think that's really beautiful to see how like folks have started like as like one entity and then start to branch out and connect even more hyper locally with folks in their neighborhood to say like, okay, let's get another one plugged in over here.
Yeah,
I think what we've, oh, go ahead, Renee.
In terms of my personal experiences with the fridge, I mean, a lot of what I've been able to plug into is based on the good work people did before me. So I am now in charge, like as in charge as we all want to say, you know, you understand me, but I help organize distribution from a bakery in Astoria, Parisi Bakery. And I do that because Leslie and Giselle, who set up the Ravenswood fridge, created that relationship between that business and the fridge. So somebody else built this thing, and then I was able to help like continue on with the infrastructure. And that in terms of a big part of what we do also is we make sure nothing goes to waste. So if something was not popular at the fridge, you know, let's say like a cucumber ended up in the back and nobody wanted to touch it, we do make sure that we compost it. And I was able to build on previous relationships with Two Coves Community Garden. Rena did that as well, and also Lou of Astoria Pug to make sure that everything has a better place than a landfill.
So I've got just a couple more minutes, but I guess one of the biggest things that I'm just listening is what are some of the biggest challenges or needs that you're facing right now?
We need more organizers, I think.
We need more food.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah,
more
we need
food.
more food. We need more volunteers who have a bike or have a car or have a granny cart that want to pick up food and drop it off at the fridges.
And we also need people to understand what food waste is and what isn't food waste, and how capitalism affects access to food. So we are developing relationships with businesses because they have excess food, and some businesses are really eager to offer what they have left over. Like, they were excited saying, we give this food to our workers and there's just so much they can eat, and we feel really bad throwing it out at the end of the night. And then there are others who will not offer us food, and then we find perfectly good food in their dumpsters. Part of that is changes that have to be made in the city and the state, but it's also understanding of what food waste is. And I think I read this week, 68% of food that's thrown out in New York City is edible, and the majority of that is actually coming from residential. So we have education to do for ourselves, and we have partnerships that we need to develop for that education. And like Renee said, we have connections to people who are doing composting and gardening. And Amber made a connection to the garden in Woodside that is going to host us to sort our food. So like making the connection between what's grown and the soil and being produced and the people who produce food, and kind of the dignity all along the line from who's creating food to who's eating the food. And that's really a big part of the fridge. It's making sure that people who need food are dignified, that there's no shame in needing food. We all need food.
Yeah, and I think on that point of dignity is also understanding food waste and knowing that the food that goes in the fridge is still wholesome and it's good for our bodies, and that it's not like the scraps. Like, everyone deserves to eat good food too. So that's definitely something that the fridges highlight. And I think it's just like a whole system. Like, the fridges are creating this whole system of like feeding people, not wasting food, composting. It's like just a whole system.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback off of that, in terms of like education and outreach, definitely, I think a part of like issues that we're facing with businesses is that they would rather pour bleach on like food than because it's not profitable. So that's a really big issue that we're having with securing food for the fridge. And in storing like dignity is just also like understanding that like the fridge, I think people have a problem with free things. So a lot of people that approach the fridge end up approaching it through a charity lens, where they think that this is for people that like are in need, whereas it's like understanding like, well, if you don't eat food, then like, how do you survive? Like, clearly you need food too. So, and you should have it for free, help yourself. So just like, I think in terms of education, like having those resources for us to talk more about that and to help destigmatize like these consumerist approaches that thrive under like capitalism. With that though, we need so many more people to be involved. This is like, I think a lot of people can be a little bit intimidating when coming to this work because it is such a new system, right? Like, we're literally creating a system outside of the one that is oppressing us, right? So it takes like a lot of work and a lot of hours. And it's like everyone coming together and contributing like their own thoughts and ideas about how we can like overcome food apartheid, how we can how can we take back our land and access resources that are constantly being denied to us. And it can be intimidating, but it's also like a really great community centered focus, right? Like we're all working together to build these new incredible systems. And the more folks that are involved, the more that we're able to grow and evolve and get these education things out, you know, and like talk through these items and like understand what composting is and all that fun stuff.
So I've got just a real quickly a minute. So if people do want to help out, where can they find you?
Well,
we don't have a
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Instagram. We have we don't have it directly on us at the moment. I don't think I have a magnet, but we have like a Google Voice number that we use, astoriafridge@gmail.com, Instagram. We don't have a direct home yet. We all organize out of like our houses, like literally wrapping bread in our homes and meeting up at different times of the night, like to have meetings and organize these stuff. But yeah, through social media right now, and hopefully like in person. Next Sunday, it'll be in person for 1 year Fridge anniversary.
That's
Saturday.
right. It's
Saturday,
the 1 year
the 26th.
anniversary. It's the 1 year anniversary. But I have one last question that I always really look forward to asking people that I get to speak with, and that is, what gets you up in the morning? What inspires you? What puts a smile on your face? That especially during this past year, where there were so many challenges, but we just keep coming back and keep working. So I'll just throw this out there. What inspires you? What puts a smile on your face?
I just want to say quickly, it was tough, especially because I started working with the fridges in June, and that's when all the George Floyd stuff was happening. So I really just to funnel my depression and my rage towards something that I found to be productive, that I felt really about. I, have worked in restaurants for a very long time, and food is one of my favorite things ever. And I saw one of the fridges and I was like, part of it. And seeing these amazing people that I've been working with for basically a year now, it's been really what gets me burnout. I still feel like there's work to be done. I might need to take a break, but I'm always going to come back and do more work.
I think COVID was a crisis, globally, but for many of us, it wasn't the first crisis we've experienced, right? So, in this type of work, we're pulling through struggle and solidarity. And that's what gets me up, right? Like the camaraderie, the revolutionary tactics, the fight for another world, like knowing that something else is possible, and being able to like make those relationships under that like idea of change, like this isn't it, like, like we will survive this. That definitely gets me up.
All of that. And this isn't going to be the only crisis. Like there is going to be like climate precarity. This is all going to continue. The beginning of the pandemic and even right before the pandemic was really hard for me. I was dealing with really bad anxiety and depression, and some days I did not want to get up. It was hard for me to leave the house even before pandemic started. So for me, it almost started a month early, and I was just starting to leave the house when everything shut down. But this was the medicine. Connecting with this community, showing up for the fridges, being involved in the change and revolution and reimagining the world we want to live in is what would get me up. And it was also the basics of like making sure the fridges are clean so that people who are coming to use them keep coming back because they don't clean themselves. Yeah. And the people who are there, like we have relationships with people both in organizing and people who hang out at the fridges.
Awesome. Well, Amber, Allie, and Rena, and Renee, thank you so much for speaking with me. I, for one, have learned a lot, and that, which means I know that a lot of other people will learn a lot. And like I said earlier, I encourage people to reach out to the Astoria fridges or wherever there is a fridge in your neighborhood. And if there's not one in your neighborhood, then find one or reach out to figure out how to start one. But I highly encourage everyone to seek out the fridges. So thank you again, and have a great night.